We're the glorified handholders of the police department. That's what we do.
An officer, a mental health therapist, and a crime response specialist that try to assist victims, bridging the gap from victimization to the point of wellness.
Back when I was on patrol, we didn't have this unit. Looking back, I feel terrible for all of the families and the victims that we, in a sense, kind of left behind.
Therapy's free, so I don't have to contact insurance companies.
I don't have to pay you?
You do not.
If I'm a victim?
You do not.
Okay.
This might be a shocker to the public, but not everyone understands the criminal justice system. So our purpose, the purpose of us, is to connect with a victim and meet them where they're at and navigate what that's going to look like for them.
Well, welcome to another episode of the Wausau PD Podcast. Here we are on a Friday morning. The sun is shining, and we're here to highlight the Victim Resource Unit, an awesome program we have here at Wausau PD. And while we don't have our full team, we have a couple members of that team, Kristen Seidler and Sarah Bedish.
So Lauren's definitely hiding somewhere downstairs.
She might be hiding. I mean, I looked in all your job descriptions to find where podcasts fit in, and believe it or not, it wasn't listed. So
on that
you're going
note,
above and beyond here today.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining me, and this will work out much better if you do most of the talking.
Fine.
Sarah's a good talker, so I'm sure.
I can just rein it in if I have to. And I will do that for you. I will do that.
So maybe as a help to our listeners, maybe just a who's who. Maybe start with Sarah. Just tell me about yourself. Anything you want to share with those that are listening to this podcast.
I feel like I'm on a date. I'm Sarah Bedish with Wausau Police Department. I have been with Wausau now for 13 years. I believe my 13-year anniversary was on the 23rd or 24th. I don't even know. Cool, I had to remind me. I'm currently assigned as our Victim Resource Officer, and I've been in this position now for 4 years. Prior to that, I was a Community Resource Officer for 4 years, and that's when I got to do some fun stuff like kicking in doors and drug busts and all that jazz. And then before that, I was on patrol, and I worked mostly night shift while I was on patrol. This by far has been honestly probably one of the most challenging positions I've been in, but I enjoy it. I do miss patrol, but this is definitely my niche, I think, the glorified handholder here at the police department. Before law enforcement, working in Wausau, I was employed with Lincoln County as a corrections officer for a whopping 6 weeks, I think it was, because I was in the hiring process here. Mm-hmm. I have a degree in criminal justice, minor in biology, and an emphasis in forensic science from the University of Platteville. My family's in law enforcement. My dad was a state trooper for 35 years, and my little brother, who used to be here and then traded up and went to Oneida County. Yeah, we won't talk about him. But my brother is in law enforcement. Oh, I miss him too, but he's having fun there. Mm-hmm. So he's in law enforcement too. So and then my mom was a corrections officer at Wausau County Jail. She was a sergeant when she retired. So
you're in the family business?
Family business, yes.
That's awesome.
I don't know what else I would do, honestly. So here we are. That's a little about me. Yeah.
Great. Mm-hmm. How about you, Kristen?
So my name's Kristen Seidler. I am the therapist here at the Victim Resource Unit at Wausau PD. And so I, trying to think about what all I want to say. Sorry. So I went to college in Minnesota, go Gophers. And then after that, I actually...
Me too, for 2 years.
After that, I went and did a lot of I worked residential treatment with teenagers at a few different facilities. And then went and got my master's so I could be a licensed therapist. So I'm a licensed substance abuse counselor and mental health therapist. And then after I got that degree, I have worked in the Eau Claire, Chippewa Falls area I did residential treatment, I did outpatient, intensive outpatient, detox. I kind of worked in all the different realms there. And so I was trying to think while Sarah was talking, I was like, how long have I actually been licensed? I remember when I graduated, but I still had to wait a few years before I could get licensed, but I was doing the work. So I always have a hard time calculating that. So we'll say I've been a therapist for 12 to 13 years. And then I started here in 2017. And I was a little hesitant because I really liked my job before. But I love it. So it's really cool to be able to kind of work in this different setting because it's way different than a clinical setting, and all the different people you meet and stuff. So I'm very happy with my decision.
Yeah, absolutely. And did you grow up in the Wausau area?
Oh, I did. Yep. I grew up in the Wausau area. I went to Everest. So my husband went to West. So.
And I went to East. Sometimes we joke about that a little bit, give each other a hard time. So
I did not grow up in
where is home?
So technically I was born in Wausau. My family, my extended family is from the Wausau area.
Yeah.
My dad was a trooper here. And then when I was about, 4-ish, my dad transferred up to Vilas County. So I technically grew up in Eagle River. And then, so my parents still live in Eagle River, and I graduated high school in Eagle River, and then obviously relocated for work and for college. So, but they're still up there. They still live up in it's funny when people are like, we're going to the Northwoods for camping. And I'm like, but are you? Like, that's my home. But no, so I grew up in Eagle River technically, but most of my extended family actually still lives in the Wausau area. So.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, Sarah, you're the victim resource officer. Kristen's the mental health therapist. Lauren Erdman's not with us today, but she's one of the other players on the field, and she's our crime response specialist. And I would say the three other members of the team are, I don't know where Soko is today.
Soko is sleeping at home right now.
Slacker.
And Soko's our therapy dog, right?
Yes, yeah.
Right.
Slacker.
Tell us a little bit about Soko and how he joined our team.
Soko is my personal dog. He's 9 years old. He's a golden doodle. He is the biggest brat on the planet. And so I'd always, when I worked in a clinic, I had been toying around because one of my colleagues had gotten her dog certified, if I could speak today, as a therapy dog. And it just seemed really fun, and I always wanted to do that just because I think having an animal present a lot of times can open people up a little bit more, put them more at ease. There's a lot of calm that like a therapy animal can bring. And so that was always just something that I wanted to do. After moving back here, I finally got it going because I could see, especially like working with a lot of like trauma and crisis stuff, how that could be really helpful. And Wausau was already doing that in the schools, which I thought was super cool.
Yeah,
so
Nick Stetzer had sort of paved the way for that.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I already knew then that you guys were pretty dog friendly. So felt a little bit more comfortable being like, can I get in on this, please?
My wife will not agree with you that everyone's dog friendly, but that's a different story.
But yeah,
That's a whole different podcast.
I think he was 4 by the time I actually got him certified. Yeah, because usually they want you to wait a year, and then we were moving, and I kind of got lazy with it. So I think he ended up being 4. So he's been here for like 5 years, I think.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I usually don't bring him on Fridays because I'm usually just doing a bunch of paperwork. But otherwise, usually he's here unless I have to go to court and different things. He was here yesterday all day for the first time in like a week and a half, I think.
And he let us know, you are the worst dog mom
Yeah,
ever.
he was so upset with me. And then, even though he didn't do anything all day, like you would have thought he trekked 20 miles yesterday. He like went straight into our bedroom and passed out the rest of the night. I was sending them a picture of him, and I was just like, somebody's not cut out for 9-hour days.
Yeah, he's so vocal. Like on Mondays when he runs into the department, you'd think he was like locked in a cage all weekend long and had no human contact.
We call him aggressively therapeutic.
He does seek you out.
Yeah,
he's not one where you need to seek the dog
Like,
out. He's going to come to you.
I am here to therapize you.
Let me help you.
Let me love you.
Yeah.
So bad.
We're happy to have Soko.
Well,
And Lauren, who couldn't be with us today.
Yes.
The only other member I'd be remiss not to mention is Nate Paul. So he's the lieutenant that helps to supervise this unit. And I think our viewers were introduced to him on episode 1, where he interviewed the chief of police. They have a connection, grew up together.
Yeah.
And he did a great job with that. So Kristen pointed out that you began maybe January, early 2017. Was that about right?
I think my official hire date was March.
Okay. So almost from the beginning, Kristen has been with us. You joined a little bit later.
Yep.
I was involved prior to your hire in the actual grant writing for this program, which I think happened maybe in early 2016. So I can probably share with our viewers just a little bit about how the VRU sort of got off the ground. Our mission here is that we partner with the community to enhance quality of life, and this would not be possible without that partnership. We've written grants before, so just for our viewers, this unit is made possible primarily with grant funds, federal funds that work their way through the state of Wisconsin and then land in the budgets of agencies like ours and other direct victim service agencies throughout the state. And we knew when we looked at this grant announcement back in maybe 2015, 2016, that there was a lot involved in this particular grant, and we needed some help. And so what we did is we partnered with some of our partner agencies like the Women's Community, the CAC, but probably most importantly, our DA's office, and then also North Central Technical College. So they had a great team of grant writers, and we did a roundtable and some mind mapping, and we together put together our first application, which can be pretty competitive. I think there's as many as like 137 different agencies just in the state of Wisconsin that apply for these, what we call VOCA funds, or Victim of Crime Act funds. And thankfully, back in 2016, we were given an award of a certain amount of money. And then we also had some other partnerships, like with the B.A. Esther Greenheck Foundation, that also provided us some funds. And then as this program has evolved through the years, the city has also provided some money to sustain this program as well. So just a shout out to all of our partners that made this possible back in 2016, because there's been a lot of great work that has transpired over the years, and we'll talk more about that. Sarah, if you were to describe what the VRU does in a nutshell, we've kind of talked about the position. So we have a full-time sworn officer that's devoted to this unit, a full-time mental health therapist, and then we have our crime response specialist, which is a 0.8 FTE, so in the office 5 days a week, but a half day on Friday. How would you describe what the three of you do?
We're the glorified handholders of the police department. That's what we do.
You are a great.
That's what we do. And it's so funny because I am not a touchy-feely, mushy-gushy person. And here I am the handholder of the police department. Primarily, the purpose of our unit is to connect our victims of crime to the necessary resources that we have in this community. I'll admit, when I was on patrol, especially on night shift, I work 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., we didn't have this unit. We didn't have anything even close to this unit. I recall having to do DART follow-ups once in a while. So that's that domestic abuse response team. I remember sometimes having to do them, but not really understanding why we did them or what the purpose was. But I just remember, we would take calls for service. We would have domestic violence or sexual assaults, or even just victims of property crimes or other persons crimes. And you took the case, you wrote the report, sometimes arrested the bad guy, sometimes you didn't. And that was it. That was just it.
Why was that it?
Well,
was it because we didn't want to follow up?
No, it had nothing to do with the want, or I think most of us wanted to do follow up, but there's only so many patrol officers on at night, and you're talking 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., and generally people are sleeping around those time frames. So trying to do follow-up on your regular assigned shift amongst your calls for service, it was very difficult to do. And you didn't want to pass along that follow-up to day shifters, and sometimes even that it'd be the next off day group. They don't know what they're following up for. And then it wasn't the Detective Bureau's assignment to follow up for domestic violence cases or sexual assaults, unless it was maybe a child involved. So it's not that we didn't want to, we just didn't have the resources nor the time to do that. And we assumed you only know what you know. There's that assumption that the women's community is doing the follow-up, or victim witness from the DA's office is doing the follow-up, or the victim, if they really wanted services, they'd figure it out on their own and know where to go. Looking back, I feel terrible for all of the families and the victims that we, in a sense, kind of left behind, simply because we only know what we know. And training, budgets as far as sending officers to trainings and bringing trainings into our area, it's expensive. And I think a lot of people assume that we can just send our officers to training whenever, but manpower and scheduling conflicts, and the cost of training is very expensive. And if officers don't want to go, you can't really make them go to a training. So I think it had a lot to do with that too. So you live and you learn. So now with that, now we have this designated unit to conduct that follow-up. And not only is there follow-up necessary for the legal side of things, for the case, for the DA's office, but just kind of checking in with that family or with that victim and inquiring with them, what do you need? What can we answer for you? What direction can we send you in? This might be a shocker to the public, but not everyone understands the criminal justice system, or not everyone has been involved in some sort of criminal case, or what it's like to go to court, or what it's like to have to fill out paperwork, what it's like to get a restraining order. It's not like TV where bad guy is arrested and there's a jury trial tomorrow and the guy is sentenced to prison forever. There's a lot of inner workings that most individuals don't understand. Right. So our purpose, the purpose of us, is to connect with a victim and meet them where they're at and navigate what that's going to look like for them, navigate that path that they need moving forward. And everybody is different. Every case is different. You may have the same victim multiple times, maybe with the same offender or different offenders, and it's still different every single time. So a lot of our job, what we do here, is we review all of the reports that come in from patrol, usually the night prior or the weekend prior. For me specifically, I tend to gravitate more towards domestic violence, sexual assault victims, because usually those ones require additional follow-up as far as the law enforcement side of things. Right. And that takes the burden off of patrol. They're busy. They have other calls to do and other reports to do. So I will do the necessary follow-up if needed. It's not always needed. Lauren she does a lot of follow-up with victims for more property crimes or victims or cases where there won't be additional legal follow-up because she can't write reports. So she'll do a lot of those follow-ups. But we connect with the victim, kind of check in and see how they're doing and what resources they need. So, just a very blatant example would be if I have a victim of domestic violence, we want to make sure that they were connected with the women's community. Usually that's occurring on scene at the time of the arrest or the time of the contact with law enforcement. Sometimes it doesn't because the victim's just not ready. So then we make sure that they're connected again. Ask them, do you know what the next steps are? Do you know what's coming next? Do you understand the process? Do you know what this means now? The offender's in jail or he has to go to court or she has to go to court. Do you know what that means? Explaining the bond condition process, the 72-hour no contact process, and then simply asking them what's going to make you feel safe. And that is very different from everybody. Everybody thinks that safety means that the bad guy goes away forever. And that's not always the case. So
it's rarely the case. Rarely the case.
And sometimes for a lot of victims, sometimes the safest they feel is when they know exactly where the offender is. And that might mean that they're at home. It's important for us to kind of set aside our bias and our own experiences and ask them, what makes you feel safe? And if in that moment they say, you know what, that I'm going to feel safe if he's just home because then I can go to work and then my kids are taken care of. Or maybe they just need groceries. They don't know how to get to groceries, so we'll get them groceries, gas cards, or just explaining the process can bring a lot of relief to a person.
Yes.
100%,
because it's so confusing.
Yes.
And I think it just helps them to feel more in control, to actually know, oh, this is what's going to happen. It just helps give that sense of security a little bit or stabilization.
Yeah, it gives them like a center. It kind of brings them because all of us, myself included, have been watching TV and growing up with this idea of how the criminal justice system works, what police officers do and what judges do, and what the DA's office does, and we have this image in our mind of what's going to happen, and in reality, that's not what happens. It's just not. Yeah. So giving a victim a sense of understanding, even if we have to repeat ourselves over and over and over again, that can be their safety planning. That honestly can be what makes them feel safe, is just explaining this is what's going to happen. And it's not, in a lot of situations are temporary. Yep. And so a lot of it is just kind of setting aside our own biases and just meeting a victim where they're at. And sometimes our follow-up with victims is once, and that's all they need from us. We have other victims who are now survivors and their case is long gone and it's closed. And we still touch base with them every once in a while just to see how they're doing. Because there's no such thing as closure. It just doesn't end. So we're constantly kind of following up with our people and our victims and making sure that they feel heard and seen.
Yeah, I think you do a great job of shedding light on exactly why this unit was conceived about 8 years ago. In that prior to this unit, you'd have an officer dispatched to a call. They would investigate that particular crime. They would provide information on victim rights, but then they would clear that call, go on to the next call. It could be a sexual assault, domestic violence, property crime, homicide, whatever that call is. And then what for that victim? And what you're pointing out is a huge gap, right? And thankfully, we partnered with an artist a couple years ago that really literally paints the picture of why this unit exists.
On the ugly wall.
On the ugly, what was the ugly white, maybe yellow wall, whatever color it was.
And that random stain that was just like hanging out there. We don't even
And the phone cord just coming out of the wall. So creepy.
But maybe Ethan can throw a picture of that up so everybody can see it. But it really talks really about bridging the gap that we identified existed for victims of crime. And it's the team of three here, an officer, a mental health therapist, and a crime response specialist that try to assist victims bridging the gap from victimization to the point of wellness. And what they're trying to bridge is that wide gap of re-victimization, which is so easy to fall into, and the unknown.
It's unknown. It's an unknown. And same thing with victims. You only know what you know. So if you've always known the life of trauma or victimization, it's very... As humans, we want to go back to what we know because it makes us feel secure and comfortable. And for a lot, that means just being re-victimized because they're already familiar with that lifestyle.
Yeah, they know what to expect with it.
They know what to expect. And they don't know how to navigate a life of well-being or a life of peace and a life of like security. They don't understand that because nobody's given them that option in a sense. And it's hard. It's very hard. It's very hard. It's a very hard decision for our clients and our victims to make, to cross over that bridge and into the light, so to speak. So,
and I think even the ones that we work with who maybe don't fully cross over that bridge, I think a lot of times just them having like the interactions with us and learning about their options and different things, you know, not everybody's ready when we want them to be ready. And there's lots of reasons for that. But I think just having those positive interactions, and they know if something else happens again, like they know where they can go to get some of those things. And it just, in my opinion, it just helps get them like slowly closer and closer to getting over the bridge. So it might not, you know, I don't want to give the false impression that everybody like that we work with, you know, goes on and is in these fantastic situations, because that's not true. But I think it helps people get where they want to go, like get them more ready to be at that point, like when it works for them. Because you're right, like before, if you don't know like what's out there and you don't know all these things, like it is just a lot easier to stay where you're at, because even though this sucks, I know this sucks. So like,
I know this sucks. I know how to navigate this sucks.
So this is better than like me not knowing anything. And so now at least like they know, okay, like I can't do it yet for these reasons, but I know like that this is out there. And so when I am more ready, like I can do that. And I think that's a huge thing as well.
And that happens. We have a lot of victims who just aren't ready. And then a year later or so, suddenly they're like, all right, let's do this. And then we just had that 4 years. I haven't met with her in almost 4 years, and she was not ready then. And this time, enough was enough, and she is like full speed ahead to the like bigger and better and greater things, and it's so awesome. It's so awesome.
Well, like you point out, Sarah, we're going to try to meet them where they're at. We're going to pursue them a little bit because we want them to know that we're there to support them, but we're not going to be pushy. We're going to be here for them, even if they say no now. We'll be here later if they want to work with us. And victims don't necessarily need to say, Sarah, I want this particular issue, you know, handled from the criminal justice side. They can receive services from the VRU without it necessarily going to it. There are some exceptions to that. But for example, somebody could see you, Kristen, and that not have to be reported to law enforcement for a criminal investigation. Because maybe, you know, sometimes victims aren't there. And maybe they never want to get to that point.
Right.
Yes.
Is that okay?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, obviously, if they're a minor, like then if they come to me, if it hadn't been reported, like I would have to report that because I'm a
Sure,
mandated
there's obligations
reporter.
under the law. Yeah.
However, yeah, like I have quite a few like adults that I've seen who have been the victims of crimes. Who just haven't wanted to report for various reasons. And yeah, they're still able to come and see me. There's no pushing that like they have to like report this at some point. Like that's completely within their control and whatever they're comfortable with. Sometimes they stay steadfast that they don't want to. I have had some who after meeting with me and just working through things, and learning about different things, because like Sarah said, you don't know what you don't know. I've had some who have decided that they did want to pursue charges, and then we can go about it that way, but that is in no way like a prerequisite for anything.
And even with my position, again, unless it's a minor, because I'm a mandated reporter, but even in my position, I've had individuals contact me and we kind of go through hypotheticals with them, because sometimes they just need to know what it would look like if they chose to report a crime, because they don't.
Yeah.
And sometimes they just need to know what that's going to look like. And sometimes they're ready then, and then they disclose. Otherwise, they're like, nope, not ready yet.
Yeah.
And I know that, yes, the police officer in me wants to arrest the bad guy, and that's my job to do. However, if supporting a victim means not writing a police report, so be it. Because if that victim feels heard and seen and supported, and we provide them with the resources they need, and nobody ever gets prosecuted, that's okay too. I guess I'd rather have that than force them to disclose, and then it puts them in a worse position than they were to begin with.
Yeah.
So we do a lot of hypotheticals.
Yep.
I've had clients have pass along information to their friends, and then I play hypotheticals with their friends because their friends were in similar situations, and we just talk through. And I'm like, you know what? When you are ready to talk, I will be here. But until then, like, let's talk about our sponsor. Like, I always feel like an infomercial, like, hear about our sponsor, but then just say, here are our resources. And so when you're ready, I'm here. And I always tell them, because sometimes they feel bad, or they feel like we're upset, or that we get offended. And I'm like, it doesn't bother me any.
Yeah.
So like, when you're ready, we will be here, and we'll navigate that at that time. And yeah, we do pursue some of our victims. We have to, like, we have to do some follow-up. It's the grant tells us we have a certain timeline, but so we do our best, but I don't make them like take it or leave it, and that's fine. If you need us again, we'll be here.
Yeah. And I think the fact that we're really real with that about stuff, like, like we don't really sugarcoat things. And because even like when I've talked with them and they're debating on whether they want to like pursue filing a report, and they have questions about, well, what if this and I'm very honest. I was like, that is very likely that could happen, and here's what we could do. However, I can't promise you that is going to totally take care of it. Like. Yeah, sometimes, unfortunately, people who are in abusive relationships, the abuser is pretty freaking awful, as can be their friends and family members. And like, you know what I mean? So I don't sugarcoat any of that stuff, and so that they have all their information so they can really decide like whether filing a report is something that they want to do. Because I think if you don't go through some of those things and be real with them about that and the possibilities, and then they happen, then like you've kind of burned a bridge with them because they don't trust you as much, and then there's some resentment and stuff there. So,
like, sometimes you have to tell them it's not going to be easy.
No,
it's honestly
terrible.
It is honestly going to suck. At points, it's going to suck, and it takes a long time.
Yeah,
like the process isn't fast. It's just not quick and easy and fast. And sometimes we have to hold their hands and be the bearer of really, 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 really crappy information, but. We have to spill the truth to them, because if we don't, it could really come back to bite us in the butt.
Yeah, I think so. And
they need to have realistic expectations through the process.
Yeah.
And like you don't know what you don't know. I think you said that. And none of us expects to be a victim of crime. But when it happens, we haven't done the research into the criminal justice system to have realistic expectations about what's going to happen from the point of, the report to the arrest to whatever follows. And it's important to be able to help them along so they have realistic expectations about what can and cannot occur.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. Correct.
So let's just take a step back and just talk like from the 30,000-foot view about process. You don't have the capacity to follow up with every victim of crime in the city of Wausau. So, what we do is every victim of crime does receive a victim information brochure, which at this point I think is at least 3 pages that outlines all their rights under state statute, Wisconsin Constitution. It provides contact information for our victim resource unit, but it also provides contact information for our local domestic violence service provider, the women's community, along with the CAC probably. I think it might have some probation parole contacts maybe. And the DA's office, obviously, victim witness there as well. So there's information in there that's helpful to them. But when it comes to the victim resource unit, Sarah, you mentioned kind of how we prioritize. So every day or every Monday, you're looking at the previous 72 hours, but you're sort of triaging the calls for service and the incidents that we investigate. And based upon the severity, you're prioritizing crimes like sexual assault, domestic violence, crimes against children, obviously homicide, intimate partner violence, anything in that arena are the things that you're typically following up on, which could be a phone call, it could be a knock on the door, it could be an email, a text message. Whatever means you can get through to that victim, you're going to make that effort to do that. And we try to do that pretty quickly. From the officer side of things, you're there to provide direct victim services, which could look like safety planning, connecting them to the therapist. Lauren might inform on crime victim rights or crime victim comp. So you're there to further the criminal investigation, but you're also there to do some of those direct victim service type things as well, because the criminal justice side of things is also a part of bringing wellness and supporting that victim as well. So we prioritize, we respond, we're there to sort of fill that, cover that, bridge that gap of re-victimization. Then, Kristen, can you just tell us a little bit more about the therapy side? Like, what should a victim expect from you?
So they can be referred to me kind of from anywhere, really. I get a lot from through Sarah and Lauren or the women's community. During the school year, I get quite a few referrals through the school for teenagers. And then really it's pretty easy because since I don't work in a clinic, I don't have to answer to an insurance company. Since my position is obviously grant funded, so the therapy's free, so I don't have to contact insurance companies.
I don't have to pay you?
You do not.
If I'm a victim?
You do not.
Okay.
Yeah, my services are free. They're paid through the grant, which again is a federal grant. It's not coming out of any taxes. Yep. Because I know that's can be an important thing for people.
Yes, the vast majority of this program is not taxpayer funded.
Correct.
It is, and we'll talk about more of the funding in a little bit.
Okay. But yeah, so they can get referred to me, and then really it kind of goes one of two ways. Either sometimes they contact me, or otherwise I will contact them. Most of the time I end up contacting them because, like I said, like for instance, Sarah will send me an email or pop in my office and just be like, hey, here's this person. Can you, they're interested. I just got done talking to them. Can you reach out? And so then that's usually where if I have their contact information and I know that they know who I am, I will contact them. Otherwise, like I said, I do have people who will contact me because they've gotten my information. But anyways, we'll set up a time to meet, and usually that's either at my office, which is here. A lot of times I'll meet with people over at the women's community, but otherwise the cool thing about my position as well, again, because since I don't have to answer to insurance companies, there aren't a lot of those rules associated that go along with some of that stuff. I can meet with them anywhere. So the vast majority is at my office here, but like during the school year, I'll meet with kids age 12 and up over at the schools. I've met with people at parks before because that's just, where they felt the safest. I've met with people at the library before, again, because that's just where they felt the safest. I give my whole spiel, and I can't guarantee confidentiality that way, but I've done phone sessions with people. I've done virtual sessions with people. So kind of whatever really works for them. There are some forms that they would have to sign, even though I'm not at a clinic. Like, there's still consents and things that, like, legally I have to have them fill out.
So apart from like meeting in their home, you try to be as flexible as you can, trying to meet the victim where they're at.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And then we kind of just go with where they're at. Like, I do have an intake that I go through with people just so I can get to know them better. However, again, I'm not confined, I guess, to a lot of the rules that like happen with an insurance company and certain things you have to have done. So sometimes, like, because people are really in the thick of it, and maybe this crime happened very recently, and like their brains are just going, sometimes they'll come into my office and like I can just kind of tell, and even they are just like just wanting to like get out what is just festering inside. So we don't go through like the intake, so I can tell me about your family growing up.
Right.
We just, what's been going on? And then we just kind of hop right to it. So I think that's kind of a cool thing as well, because it's just another example of how I can kind of just meet them with where they're at. And like, okay, like let's just take care of this immediate stuff then like right now to kind of help you feel like you have some footing beneath you. Right. And then if there's other layers, which usually there are, like, right, humans are very complicated. We have lots of layers to things. Things aren't usually super simple. We can kind of tackle that stuff, later on. So,
and you highlight the importance again of partnership, like being able to meet victims where they're at, where they're located requires some partnership, like with the Wausau School District, like with the women's community, the library, the CPC, a variety of other areas that requires us to have good relationships with our community, which I'm so thankful that we do have.
Absolutely.
And we couldn't do our jobs the way in which we do them. With the excellence at which we do them without our partner agencies. So just a shout out to those agencies.
And, with something I always, when I'm talking to a victim or potential client of Kristen's, their biggest, like she said, the biggest concern is pay. Like, I can't afford that. Yeah. Well, but it's free. Yeah. So the cool thing is it's free all the time. But then there's no like time frame either. Nope. It's always free. And it's confidential. So I always tell a victim, so that's one of the reasons we wanted the pretty wall. We didn't want victims walking past the ugly wall with a random stain and phone cords hanging out of the ceiling, because that doesn't make anybody feel good.
What the heck am I getting
What am I doing? I'm in the basement of the police department and there's this ugly wall.
There's nothing therapeutic about this.
No, like this is creepy. So what's one of the reasons we wanted to make that space nice. One thing I always tell victims though is that if they're meeting with Kristen, it is confidential. Yes. It's confidential, just like they were seeing any other healthcare provider. Information they share with Kristen does not get disclosed to me, and it doesn't go in a report anywhere.
Even if it's about
the case. And I may see them out of my peripheral walk past, but we don't engage with them by any means. So I always tell them that whatever you share with Kristen is 100% confidential. We don't know when people are coming and going or when they are scheduled. So that's always a big thing, is knowing that information is not getting passed along. Another thing I always tell victims as well is it is nobody's business what type of resources you use in our community for your victimization. So like that information doesn't go in a report. Like I don't do a supplement and say, oh, I referred victim to women's community or Kristen or children's advocacy or whatever it was. Or I went and bought $100 worth of groceries for this victim. Yeah.
Right.
It doesn't get documented for the public to see. We have to document it on our end, what type of resources we offer to victim, but it doesn't go anywhere. And it's frankly, like I always tell people, it's nobody's business what type of services you needed. Yeah. So that I think that I have found is a huge, huge motivator for clients to seek services when they know that information is kept private.
Yeah.
So
we're so happy to be able to, with these grant funds, eliminate the barrier of having to pay for services of a mental health therapist. The one condition to receive any services from the Victim Resource Unit is you need to be a victim of a crime, right? Yes. Which doesn't necessarily need to be a crime from the present. It could be a crime from the past that was or was not reported to law enforcement, but that is contributing to whatever you're struggling with in that
Correct.
particular
Yeah.
And
moment,
that
right?
happens often.
Yeah.
It happens very often. And I think that's wonderful that we're able to, or secondary victims, where we
Yes.
have a family, like you,
Like
we
the
have
parent of a-
a parent of a child victim, or
Who's considered a victim under the law.
correct.
technically.
Yes.
So they
Yep.
can seek services, which is sometimes you can see like the relief.
Yeah, because parents get forgotten about sometimes with
do.
that, which because
Or
all the focus is
spouses.
on them, which
Yep.
it's good. But yeah, it's
Or
it's
spouses.
Yeah,
Yep. Same thing. Yeah. It's
like-
really wonderful to be like, how are you doing?
yeah, exactly.
so-
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've eliminated the whole financial,
Yes.
hurdle that people need to jump through over to get into therapy. Wait lists are a thing, though, right?
Especially in this community, and I'm
it's
I'm
horrible.
assuming it's a statewide and nationwide issue.
Yeah.
Yes, no wait list with me. So
I might have to wait a little bit, but
yes, correct.
I mean, I've seen your calendar, Kristen, and it is.
It's summer now, so it's
Yeah,
it's
well.
dying down a little bit. But I think the most anyone actually that was the most that people maybe on a more consistent basis would have to wait is like 2 weeks.
Okay.
There has been times where like people have had to wait a month, but those were pretty rare times. So I don't really. I mean, they count, but like I don't really.
Yeah.
They were more outliers, but usually you can get in with me like the next week. Usually,
That's
but
great.
usually no more than 2 weeks, which is really nice.
Right.
Because yeah, like I think a lot of other places. I was just talking with somebody, and I think it was like 3 months,
Oh yeah.
and I think that was shorter. Like I've heard of 6 months and things. So yeah,
Like there's other places where you have to wait that long to even get on the wait list.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
The
it's
wait
not-
list to wait even longer.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, there's a big need there, and I'm glad that we have a team that can complement and supplement a lot of the great existing resources within our community.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And
So-
too, if somebody does come to see me and they just don't feel like our personalities are really meshing and I have no problems like trying to find like somebody else that can help them. Like granted, it won't be free, but
Yeah.
but I always tell people that as well, because it's not good to feel like you're stuck
Right.
somewhere, like, because that's not going to be very helpful for you. And if you don't feel like you're really vibing with your therapist, you're not going to
Yeah.
open up as much. So
Are there
We're
any
really good at
limits? Are there
referring
any
to-
limits on the number of times somebody can see you, Kristen?
No.
No?
No.
Okay. So you'll stay alongside and supporting
yeah,
that
for as long
victim?
or as little as they need. Kind of like Sarah said, I have some people who just come and see me maybe once or twice, and we just kind of go through some basic skills, and that's enough to really help them. I mean, I might check in with them a few times just to make sure everything's still going well, but that's all they need. And then I have other people that I've been seeing on and off for years. So not that that's been super consistent, but it's something too where as they're feeling better about things and more confident in themselves and their abilities to kind of deal with stuff, we'll decrease sessions. And then sometimes, they do kind of say, you know what, I don't think I need to see you right now. Cool, great, like that's awesome. But then when things come up, a lot of times with court cases, because the court system, unfortunately, some of those things can take multiple years to kind of get through the court system. When court dates or different things come up, or sometimes anniversaries to things come up, they might contact me again and just, because they're having a harder time and just want to know, hey, can we meet up? And yes, absolutely, come on in, and kind of like little booster sessions almost.
Right.
So,
Which is, and it's the same thing with like Lauren and I.
Yeah. Yes.
With like, there are victims that we know for the longest time. I had one victim. I had a reminder in my calendar. I just checked in with her every single month. And that's every single month. And finally, after, I think it was a year, she's like, you know what? I'm doing all right. So I kind of miss, you get to know people.
You get invested in it.
You do. Like you get to know a person past their victimization, and there are some victims that I kind of miss every once in a while because they're just wonderful people, and you just get to know them and their families and their kids. And so, but yeah, same thing with Lauren and I. I know there's a couple of clients that Lauren and I, we still touch base with. Just checking in, seeing how they're. I mean, it's free for them to talk to us, but you just check in and just see how things are going.
Well, and I think it helps too because obviously we hope like nothing bad happens in the future to them, but life happens, and sometimes crappy things unfortunately happen to us again. And I think having those like relationships helps them to hopefully feel less like guilty, shameful, embarrassed about it, and reach out so that we can like get on it right away, so that you're not like just sitting there with all this stuff like festering around.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Just on that point, as the program manager, I have the pleasure of reading the surveys that we send out, and some of them are sent back to us. And I've read some really powerful testimonials from our victims. For example, on more than one occasion, I've heard something similar to this. One of our victims says, the VRU is a godsend. I'm so thankful for the guidance and support. It literally saved my life. I mean, could you share a little bit more about those type of testimonials and the difference that the VRU is able to make?
So, I mean, I don't think the community, or even like community, our family, friends, if they're outside of law enforcement, I don't think they understand how something so when kind words come our way, not only to us at the VRU, but just to police officers in general, how much that means to us. Because unfortunately, as a police officer, we see more bad than good. That is just the reality of it. We see people and families on their worst days. We see them in their worst versions of themselves, whether it's purposeful or by no act of their own, but we see the bad of the bad of the bad. And we oftentimes, and granted I'm speaking for the department as a whole, but we oftentimes leave our shifts wondering, did I do good enough? Like, did I do what I was supposed to do? Did I save that person? Was like you think about it.
Yeah.
Even though like deep down in our gut, we know that we did as much as we could. We did exactly what we were supposed to do, but you still think about it day in and day out. You just sit there and go, did that person listen to us? Are they going to be safe? Like there have been nights I've laid awake thinking, oh my gosh, that person's going to die tonight, or whatever. So when we hear messages like that, and it doesn't even have to be that heartfelt, sometimes just a simple like, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to me. Or thank you for being so kind. Thank you for being so respectful. Or thank you for, or I've heard oftentimes like, sorry, I was so rude to you. And I'm like, oh, it's fine. Like I hear that, sorry, I was so mean, or sorry, I was so grumpy. I was just so angry.
No.
And I'm like, hey, you know what? I get it. We all have our bad days too. But words like that outweigh all the bad that we see. And it reminds us that we are doing a good job and we are impacting some people. Even if it's for 30 seconds, we are impacting them in some way and leaving some sort of positive light in their world. So those things, those types of words, like I've gotten messages from victims that I haven't shared, and but they like take my breath away, like, and because they're so wonderful and so kind. And I often sit there and go, okay,
I don't suck.
I don't suck. I still got it. All right.
Yeah. I mean, credit to the victims, the survivors, for getting through their ordeal, but also for taking the time to kind of inspire us to keep going, because it can be difficult at times. When we
don't need thank yous. Like we do this job.
We're not fishing for compliments here, but
nope. And we didn't sign up for this job. We didn't sign up for the pay, and we certainly didn't sign up hoping we'd get thank you cards in the mail. But every once in a while, it's pretty wonderful.
It is nice.
It is nice.
It is nice.
I mean, it's great to see when we look at the number of surveys that are returned. Just last year, 91% of those that returned a survey said, I agree, or I strongly agree that my life has improved because of the services that you guys provide. And that's awesome. That's what we want. We want, despite how difficult the circumstances were, to see that their life is enhanced because of what you're doing day in and day out.
We did something.
Yeah. And what they're doing. I tell my clients all the time. I'm just like, I'm not you. You're with me 1 hour a week.
Yeah,
like,
you're doing the rest
of it. Yeah.
That's what I always tell I shouldn't say my victims, but like I used to call them, I used to call my ducklings, like my little ducklings. But they're the rock stars.
Yeah.
They're the ones that like having to deal with life and then trauma all mixed in, and then probably kids running around and like all the just normal stuff. And they're the rock stars, not us. So we're just in the corner waiting to hold their hands. So
Well, as we go into the next grant cycle, I had to kind of look at the numbers of the people that you've served through the years. And when I looked at the last 4.5, almost 5 years, you've served over 1,100 victims of crime. There's been over 6,000 instances of counseling, over 2,500 therapy sessions. I told you your schedule is full, sometimes maybe too full. And then numerous instances of providing information on the criminal justice system, individual advocacy, safety planning, referrals to other service providers within the community. Before we talk a little bit more about maybe the uniqueness about this unit and its integration within a criminal justice agency, and does every police department have that? My question is, like, we have therapy, we can assist with the criminal investigation, maybe on the safety planning side of things. What could victims expect from us on like the safety planning side of things? Like, do we assist with things like restraining orders, protection orders? What if they're inclined to go back to, the offender in a domestic relationship because the offender was the sole provider and now they have no money and I have rent that's due today, or I'm dealing with a stalking issue and, do you assist with a security camera in my house or something like that? Like, just give me in a nutshell, some of the services that we provide.
My job's pretty awesome. I can go shopping at Target pretty much whenever I want, and I just have to ask for a credit card.
No, the budget is not endless.
You can tell he's a great
it's so much fun to be like, I'm going to need a credit card today. Why? Don't worry about it. No,
fine.
So safety planning, and to each one, every situation is very different. So restraining orders, we can assist with restraining orders on how, like, which restraining order you may need, because there's different ones. So you may just need a harassment injunction, and that's if you're not, doesn't meet the domestic criteria. Otherwise, we can assist with a domestic violence injunction. So Lauren and I can both do those. Otherwise, that was one thing that we would absolutely refer out to an advocate, because they're just better at it.
They're more do them every day.
They're just more efficient at it.
Yes.
But with that, the advocate may have helped them with paperwork and getting it filed. But Lauren and I can accompany a victim to the restraining order hearing, because it's a lot. It can be pretty intense, and if you've never been to court, it's crappy. So we will certainly, we can go with them to that. Another thing, even with safety planning, is accompanying victims to court in general. Because again, they don't know what to expect. And sometimes the offender's family or friends are there and
intimidating.
Tend to do things that are inappropriate. So it's nice to just have like a literal safety figure with you to kind of keep you safe in court. Yeah. Cameras, we buy a lot of security cameras, whether it's ones that mount onto the house or if it's a Ring doorbell, whatever is going to be the easiest for a victim to either install themselves or us, because we'll install stuff too. Or just user-friendly for that particular person. Changing locks. We will call and have your locks changed on all of the doors, whether that's rekeying the doors completely or just providing different deadbolts or different locks. And again, that would be covered under our Victims of Crime Act, because that would be considered emergency funding for the safety of the victim. So we would do that. If a victim needs rent, we will certainly help with rent expenses, whether that's us paying that rent in full for the month, or sometimes we partner with the women's community and we'll do halvesies. And then a lot of times the women's community may take that rent over and offer long-term assistance for that victim. It is very common for a victim, for the offender to maybe be the breadwinner of the household, or he or she was the child care provider, and now the victim has to go to work. So we will certainly discuss your financial situation and assist with finances that, as a direct result of the victimization, need our assistance. Right. We've paid a lot of rent. Or helping victims relocate. We've also done that. If it's The safety planning includes them. We just got to get you out of the area, or we need to move you from the east side to the west side. So we will assist with U-Hauls, moving expenses, storage units if you have to store your things like that. So that's another thing that would fall under our emergency fund. Groceries. Hey, if you have no means to get to the grocery store and we need to feed you and your children, we will do the grocery shopping for you. So that would also fall under that. Cell phones, new cell phones. So a lot of times victims are hesitant to close out their personal phone because that's their means of communication. Yeah. Right. But we will provide a different phone in the meantime so that they can slowly start transferring their information over and updating the necessary contacts, especially like a stalking situation. So that would also fall under safety planning. Also, though, safety planning can just be simply like, okay, so offender is in custody right now. These are the no contact provisions, whether it's a bond condition put in place by court or it's a 72-hour. What is our plan of action when and if they get out of custody? What are we going to do? Yeah. Are you letting him back into the home? Do you plan to let him back into the home? Do you know what to do if he comes home? Okay, so you're going to let him back into the home. We're going to strongly advise against that if it is a domestic violence situation, but everyone, again, that might make the victim feel safe. So we'll talk through, okay, if he is at home, what are your plans if things start to get out of hand again? Do you know who to call? Do you know where your phone is? Do you have an extra set of keys that you can leave it at a moment's notice? Do you need a second phone so you have a 911 phone call to use? So we'll go through those steps, kind of like when you go through a fire drill step with your child. What do you do if this happens? What are you going to do if this happens? Talking those things through with a victim puts it in the forefront of their brain, and it'll be easier for them to think about doing those things when they have to do it. And
I think like early warning signs, like
yes.
So like, how do you know when offender is starting to like get irritated? Like, what are some common things that happen? And like having them point those out, and then okay, so when you notice this, what are we gonna do? Like instead of waiting until it's like maybe gotten to a point where now we like don't feel comfortable doing something, like let's figure out the early those really, so that it's easier for you to like get out, be safe, like do some of those things. I think it's really important because a lot of times they don't think about that.
They don't. Nope. Or they're so used to it. It's because it's mundane. It's a mundane encounter. With stalking victims, the biggest thing with a stalking victim is documentation. So if we have a victim who maybe we've already issued that stalking warning letter to the offender, or maybe they've already been arrested for stalking, with a stalking victim, the main thing I always tell them is start documenting everything. Start taking note of everything that makes you feel uneasy. The more documentation we have for a stalking case, the better. Another thing I do with them is like check your car for any sort of like cameras or tags that may have been put on your vehicle. Let's check your phone for apps or apps that may have been downloaded. Why don't we start changing usernames and passwords and try to reroute emails to a different account? Because with this day and age and technology, it's very easy to digitally, wow, that was a hard word to say. Oof. Stalk a person without ever having be present or like in the physical proximity of that victim. So just kind of talking those things through with a person gets them to start thinking and then just start documenting. So, and then safety planning also includes making, if they're pregnant, following up on their medical appointments, and then obviously keeping them in contact with the women's community too.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I just want to reiterate that the emergency fund is not endless.
It is
despite the fact that you just grab a card and you go and buy what you need to buy.
Do what I want to do.
There are limits on it. Some of the other limits are, for example, we can't pay mortgage. We can't give cash. But all the other things that you mentioned are ways in which we can help bridge that gap of revictimization and provide some assistance, some immediate emergency assistance to victims to help them on their way.
And we do a lot of thinking outside the box.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We do a lot of, okay, this option isn't going to work, but how can we figure out how to navigate this? Because there's rules that we have to abide by with VOCA.
Yep.
So we do a lot of thinking outside the box.
Yeah.
A lot of thinking outside
And
the
I
box.
would say too, like a lot of the people that we see, they're pretty like resilient and creative with things too, because they've been trying to make stuff work for forever. So a lot of times they're like, oh, well, I could do this. And I'm like, yes, do that.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
Yes. Love that
Great
idea.
idea.
Going to note that for someone else.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And transportation, that's another thing I think I forgot to mention. The VRU, we are lucky. We have vehicles that we can utilize for transportation.
Now, we can't give them the vehicle, but we can.
Yeah.
I will drive you.
Yep.
I will drive you. You can sit in my front seat with warm seats because I have heated seats. No,
Yeah,
but
and Lauren's done that before too.
Yep, we transport people. So like we can transport them to and from court. We can transport them to and from Kristen, to the women's community, medical appointments, childcare. We have car seats that we can utilize. So
Child Advocacy Center, too.
Yep, which we've done, or sometimes just to go get coffee. Like I've met with victims and I interview them in a safe place, and sometimes that means just bringing them coffee, and that's what we do. So we have that ability too, so that they're not having to ride in a marked squad car.
Yeah. I don't transport people though,
No.
because
No.
good old therapy boundaries.
But we have that vehicle to utilize if
But
needed.
yes,
yeah.
but
Boundaries are a good thing.
Boundaries.
Sarah and Lauren all day.
We got this.
Let's just talk about the uniqueness of this program. Like, does every law enforcement agency have something like this?
No. I love going to trainings, like especially like victim trainings or like law enforcement trainings regarding trauma-informed care and whatever. And when other law enforcement agencies hear about what we do, they're like, what? You have that? Like, oh yeah. They're like, oh, that's so cool. Like they're just like mind blown. They're like, how do you do that? I'm like, I don't know. I just get to work there. So
Yeah.
I just show up.
I just
I
show
ask
up.
for a credit card.
and I get to
we
go
get it done.
I get to go shopping at Target. That's
Yes.
fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that there's anyone in the state who has like a therapist actually like on staff. I think that some
think
police
so.
departments might have a social worker, or they might contract out through, like Dane County, I think it's through their victim witness program.
Oh,
so not
sure.
actually the police department, unless that's changed because
I don't know.
But I
I
don't
know
think that there's lots.
some departments have advocates that are like
Yes.
embedded within
Yeah.
the department.
Yep. Yeah.
But I don't know if that's VOCA. I have no idea how that's utilized.
Yeah.
But again, I don't know if they just, but what their follow-up looks like. If it's just an officer that does it, if it's a detective that just maybe is assigned to sensitive crimes. But like the unit itself is an anomaly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say that's accurate. I
Yep.
think it is an anomaly. I mean, other departments are doing wonderful things in direct
Yeah.
victim services, but VOCA's not easy. Grant writing is not easy. That might cause some to be shy of doing that amount of work to get what we have. But I'm just so thankful that we've done the work. Like you point out, it's an anomaly that we have this trifecta of an officer, a mental health therapist, a crime response specialist that's integrated on the front lines.
Yeah.
Like you can't get any closer to a victim than what you are. If you're a victim and it's reported to the police, you're aware of it and you have the ability to follow up, as opposed to some of our other service providers in our community who are doing great and wonderful things. However, there's gaps between the victimization and them, and we're going to keep repeating this analogy, but we're bridging the gap.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's a significant one at times.
Yep.
So,
And I think it builds a good relationship with law enforcement too. When we not only, I think victims understand that there are individuals out there for their like therapy and victim witness or social workers or the women's community. They understand that realm. I don't think they're a little shocked when an officer shows up and says, hey, I heard about your situation. Let's talk. Like, I care. They're just not used to that. So I think that helps them trust our department a little bit more, and it gives them at least one person that they can go to, because it may not always be the same patrol officer. Maybe they didn't like that patrol officer. But I think it also, having our unit and having a police officer embedded in the VRU helps build that connection with the community. So, in my opinion.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm
no,
pretty great, but
100%.
I'm just kidding.
yeah. Before we talk more about the funding of the unit, I threw out a bunch of numbers a few minutes ago that tells the story over the last 4.5 years. But to make it more manageable, maybe in the minds and ears of our listener, we endeavor to serve about 300 victims per year. And if we look at last year, I think we met that mark, and about half of them engaged in therapy with Kristen. And of course, there's safety planning in between. There's the furtherance of the criminal investigation. And so that just kind of gives our listeners an idea of how many victims you're truly serving each year. So back to the funding of the Victim Resource Unit. Like I said, this began back in 2016 with an announcement from VOCA, which is the Victim of Crime Act, which goes all the way back to 1984. So there is this thing called the fund, the Crime Victim Fund, which is a federal fund. And all the way back in 1984, they decided that any monetary penalties associated with some type of federal conviction would land in this fund that can then be distributed to those that are serving victims across the U.S. And it wasn't until 2016 that we began to have this idea, is there ways in which we could apply for that funding and improve the services that we provide to the Wausau community? And thankfully, we've been doing that. So we've had VOCA funding, which has been the primary funding source through the years. And then we had some assistance from the B.A. and Esther Greenheck Foundation. And what the Greenheck Foundation did is they covered what VOCA can't cover for Sarah's position. So back when this started, the officer was what we called 70% VOCA, that means direct victim services, and 30% law enforcement services. So furthering the criminal investigation, writing police reports. In the last 5 years, you've been 50-50, right? So 50% of the time is direct victim services. The other half is spent on the criminal investigation side of things, which we're very thankful for. And so to maintain this program for the last 4.5 up to 5 years, VOCA allots $300,000 per year to maintain this program, and that's a good estimate around the cost of this program. But what we've learned is that there are some difficulties that lie ahead. For the longest time, non-prosecution agreements and deferred prosecution agreements at the federal level historically did not land in that crime victim fund federally. And over the course of years, that fund began to dry up. And I think it was in 2021 that President Biden signed the VOCA Fix Act, which now puts DPAs and deferred prosecution back into that fund, but it doesn't fix things today. And so the administrator of all of these funds is the Office of Crime Victim Safety down in Madison. Fantastic group of people down there that make this grant possible for us. But what we're facing here, we're coming to the end of our 5-year grant cycle at the end of September. And we just submitted our application yesterday. But for all service providers in Wisconsin, everybody is capped at $250,000 per year. And like I pointed out earlier, there's 137 that are currently receiving VOCA funds, and I think 70 of those are currently receiving more than the $250,000 per year. So it's going to be a very competitive process for us to maintain this program, but our fingers are crossed, and we're hopeful that we continue to be funded at the level that we have been funded. Of course, we're looking at a minimum of a $50,000 decrease in what has been allotted, but what has been presented to our Finance Committee and City Council is a budget that maintains our services, but changes things up a little bit for Sarah. I mean, still 100% devoted to the unit. However, your position will not be VOCA funded at all.
Nope.
How we've changed things in order to come under that $250,000 is that 25% of Sarah's time will be devoted to direct victim services, but we won't be compensated with federal dollars for that. That'll be towards our mandatory match. So still doing the great things that you're doing, but it just looks a little bit different from the budget side of things. And in this scenario, the city would be picking up 100% of your position. So the city is providing a little bit more for what we believe is an essential police service to our community. So like I said, we should hear maybe August. Best case scenario, maybe July, about where funding for our grant application stands. But like I said, we remain very, very hopeful. Personal insights and experiences.
Oh, goodness.
we've gotten into that a little bit. But are there any like stories or experiences or anything that you'd like to share that sort of illustrate the challenges and rewards of working with the VRU? We're certainly not going to name any victims or get too detailed, but is there anything that you think might be helpful for our listeners?
Yes, I have one.
You go for it.
Oh my goodness. Well, it's an older one, but so a couple years ago, I had the pleasure of working with a victim. And technically, the crime had occurred outside of the city of Wausau. So I was outside my jurisdiction as far as like getting to arrest the bad guy.
Yeah.
However, the victim had a good relationship with offender's probation agent. So the probation agent had reached out to me and asked if I would, if this victim was ready to come forward, if she could talk to me. And I said, absolutely, we'll work through it. If I have to refer it out to a different agency, we'll cover that bridge when we get there. And sure enough, the victim ended up calling me later that day. And initially we were kind of just doing like hypotheticals, and then like sometimes they just like all of a sudden just unload. And I remember like scrambling to get my recorder going, like trying to record this conversation. And I remember by the end of my conversation, I was on the phone with her for a long time, and it was strangulation, battery, false imprisonment, recklessly endangering safety. She was pregnant at the time with his child. And it was horrible. It was just horrible listening to her. And I remember towards the end of the conversation, I had convinced her to let me come and interview her at her place of residence so I could bring an advocate with me. And I told her on the phone, I'm like, I want to come give you a hug. Like my heart just hurt. My heart hurt for her listening to the horrible things that she had endured. So anyway, we went over there, we interviewed her, and she's got the most amazing children on top of it. It was just great. It was great. So like I said, it wasn't a Wausau case. And it was like Mosinee, I think Kronewetter, Everest, like it just spanned all over the place. But he was essentially taken into custody and he was sentenced and he's in prison now. But at the time of his sentencing, I got to hold the baby. I was holding his son while he was being sentenced. And that was the child that she was pregnant with when he was abusing her. And so it was just like this wonderful feeling to see this beautiful little boy. He's safe. He's wonderful and he's safe. And she still visits me every once in a while. And they bring me treats. They brought me like stuff for Valentine's Day. And so he's 2 or 3 now. I can't remember. But he's just so beautiful and perfect. But like it was just this we could not have done that because that was a case where there was harassment from the outside. There was harassment from friends and family. And it was kind of just ongoing. And if it wasn't for her resilience, I don't know if she would have made it because it was a really, really horrendous case.
I remember that because I think I saw her a few times.
Yeah.
And then, she switched over so she could be at the same place that her kids were getting counseling, which was perfect. Like, worked out really nice. But like she is like a freaking rock star.
She is a rock star. And she went back to school.
Yep.
We helped her with relocation and getting her a new, safer home to live in. So we helped her with rent. But she is in school and she's like getting straight A's, and I don't know how she does it. I don't know how she does it. But like holding that little, that was just.
He is a cutie pie.
Oh, he's such a ham. Oh my goodness.
He's cute.
He's such a ham. But she'll send me pictures every once in a while of the kids, and it also helps that I love kids. So. Yeah. But that's one of my favorites.
Oh.
So
thanks for sharing that.
That is a good one. You did.
I have the
work
Minnesota
on that
one too.
I was thinking about the Minnesota one.
Yeah.
And there are countless stories that we could tell. And that's part of our grant writing too, is, we need to provide some stories for each type of kind of the major victimizations like domestic violence, sexual assault, crimes against children, things like that. And I guess before we wrap this up.
Wait, do you have a story?
Yeah, you can share.
Oh, I don't know if I have like specific. I was just thinking about I call them my kiddos, like the teenagers I see.
Oh, yeah.
And just some of the ones that like had some pretty crappy things going on. But it was just nice to see them like graduate from high school when they never thought that was going to be something that they would do. I had one of those this year, and we were texting, and they're like, I can't believe I actually did it. And I was like, it's so awesome. But then I have another one too, who's doing really well and is off at college now, and actually like going into, I don't know what area they're going to pick, but it's like in the criminal justice area. And I just think some of those things are just really cool. So,
yeah, maybe the silver lining of a little recruitment tool.
Yeah.
No,
based upon
run away. Run away.
it's the most noble profession on the planet.
Yeah, it is.
So yeah, I can't think of like super specific, but it's just like those ones that I'm always like, oh, that's so nice.
Yeah.
Or I have one who texts me every year on their sobriety date. That always melts my heart.
Yep.
For another, they're like, oh, I made it another year. I'm like, that's so awesome. It just makes me so happy.
Yeah.
I know. I just thought about actually that case where they're, I think Mel worked it too. The one that we just went to, well, I just went to court for finally. I just thought of that one too. That was a good case where the assault happened over COVID. And so I ended up doing a lot of phone sessions with this individual for a while. And she was just like not confident in herself at all and like really upset about everything that had happened. And then fast forward 4 years, because that's how long it took for this case to actually wrap up due to several factors that I will not get into. That just happen in the legal system sometimes. Nothing anybody can do about it. But she actually was able to like get on the stand and like did so well. And like that was such a big thing because like she was so terrified about doing that and like almost wanted to like stop participating in the legal process. Granted, this is all through like the 4 years. And then like got the conviction, and I think I was happier about it than she was. Like, I was just like ready to like do a dance in court and be like, you know, not appropriate. And she was just very much like, yeah, I feel vindicated. And she was just like so like, and I was just like, oh my gosh, like I am the immature. Like,
oh no,
you're
I have moments like that too.
You're like the stable, like rational one right now. And I was like, man, what a difference like 4 years makes, and just like all the work that this individual put into themselves and like going through. Because even though this happened to him, it brought up stuff like that had happened like since childhood. And so like we kind of worked through, and it was just really cool just to see like that transformation and like much more confident, much less people pleasing. And not that like they don't still want to like do nice things for people, but just like it's okay to say no. And like you don't have to do everything for everybody else. And that's okay. And that doesn't make you a selfish person like they're telling you.
Yeah. My favorite is when like like I mentioned, like I think right in the beginning, the victim that 4 or 5 years ago, she wasn't ready. Like like we had cases against this individual, but mom just wasn't ready. But now she is like full steam ahead. And like, there's this moment of like, you're just so proud. I don't know how to explain it because like we did nothing. You're so proud of the progress they make. It's the most amazing thing.
Yeah, and all the crap that they sometimes deal with. Like this one in particular, like there was some intimidation and stuff that was going on that just like made me see red. And just like that, you know, for them to deal with and you just think about it and you're just like, it's just such, like you get very invested.
Oh yes.
You do.
Like, you do. And I was just, I felt vindicated. It wasn't me at all, but I was just like,
at the end, it's okay to celebrate. I mean, we're fans of justice.
Yes.
And it's so nice to see justice served.
Yes.
And to see victims improve in their wellness along the way.
It's huge.
Yeah.
Well, as we wrap up here, what advice would you give victims of crime who might be hesitant to seek help, whether that's from you or another service provider in the community?
That's a hard one.
It is a hard one. My initial advice would be to pick out somebody that you trust and you feel like is supportive of you and just maybe start to open up and like to them a little bit. Because sometimes I think it's just like those little baby steps because it can be really, I mean, it's scary to like have to go through some of these things, and some of these things like we're really embarrassed and shameful about. So if there's even one person that like you maybe feel comfortable like disclosing a little bit to, I think that could be helpful. Or even if not that, like write it in a journal. Like I help like start with baby steps, like in practice, maybe because sometimes that just, it sounds silly, but it kind of helps almost like warm us up a little bit and get us more comfortable, like talking about that and even kind of like deciphering how do I really feel about this, you know, because we talk ourselves out of things all the time and minimize things a lot of the time. And sometimes we like, you know, make things bigger than they actually are as well.
Yep.
So that's where I think sometimes, like, even if it's just writing it down or saying it out loud, whether that's to somebody or just sitting by yourself in your room or something, I just think sometimes that can kind of help get those wheels turning, helps us to be able to process through some of those things more. And then, you know, can create some of those building blocks for whether or not, you know, they really want to, whether that's filing a report or going to like, the women's community or contacting me or you or Lauren or whoever else about just some things. So
I would agree. I would also say, like, if you're an adult, because if you're a child, like, obviously we have mandatory laws, but as an adult, it wouldn't hurt to just, you know, reach out to law enforcement and say, I have a situation. I'm not sure if I'm ready to report on it yet.
yes.
What are my options? What would that look like? Because sometimes just knowing those options and what it would look like helps. And to know that it's okay if they're not ready to report that day either.
Yeah.
I would say that's just a baby step.
No, I agree.
Just kind of getting your feelers out there and seeing what their options are.
Yeah, and just getting educated on that. Because officers can just do an informational report where you just tell them everything and at least it's down.
It's there. Yep.
It doesn't have to become like an actual case report.
And if it does get to the point of being, you know, charged out and prosecuted, there could be evidence on the front end that's lost.
Sure.
You know, they could call and we can talk about options, and that officer or maybe Sarah will provide some, hey, write this down, preserve this, you know, do this, don't do that, so that if it comes to the point of, like I said, charging and prosecution, it's a case that'll stick.
Sure.
And justice can be served.
And just knowing that a victim's statements it's evidence. So just your words can sometimes be enough.
Yep.
It doesn't hurt to just ask and put yourself, like, inquire about what it looks like. And just also to know that as crappy as the situation may be, or moving forward, the court process, the reporting, all of it, it's going to be hard, but they're not alone.
Right.
They're not alone. There are so many people waiting in the corners to help and to, like, offer a hand. They don't have to do it on their own. There's going to be people who are going to be with them every step of the way.
Right.
And that's where, too, even just, like, you can just call us. I mean, if you just, maybe it's something that maybe it was prosecuted a long time ago and you're still struggling with it and that feels really, like, weird or bad for you. Or maybe it's something where, like, you just have absolutely no intention, like, you don't even want to, like, think about, like, filing a report based on whatever reason, like, but you still want some assistance and you're just, like, just call us. Like, you can call me, like, you know, if nothing else, because we can figure out what's going to be best, like what's going to best fit your needs, basically. So,
yeah, one of the main points I think each of you made, and I heard this at some point in the past, but that healing happens in relationship, not just any relationship, but healing happens in healthy relationship, and we're here for victims to, you know, establish that professional relationship with them, to meet them where they're at, and hopefully get them where they want to go. And not to be too pushy, but to you know, come alongside and support them. And so thank you both for participating in the Wausau PD Podcast. I think that's what we're calling it, right, Ethan? That's it. Pretty original. But yeah, I hope that this has been informative to our viewers and listeners out there. And like I said, we're here to serve you.
Yes, please call. If you have questions, ask.
Look at the number at the bottom of your screen. Sorry.